myself, and then I will let each of the panelists introduce themselves. My name is Umbreen Mirza. I am an international development practitioner, an educator, and an entrepreneur based out of Boston, and a loyal Boston Greenfest fan since 2015. And with that, I will let Ward introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ward Stirrat. I'm from Vancouver, Canada. I'm a lifelong entrepreneur, so I'm sure it's similar as everybody else in the room. My current projects are Credyts, which is a community currency, and the other one is Transkarbon, where we're looking to transition out of the carbon economy. And I am an avid decentralist. As we were speaking last night, I think my overarching goal is to relocalize. So that'll be my perspective from today.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us. Wadi Muhammad.
Sorry, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Good afternoon. I'm representing BioClean Boston as the co-founder and CEO. I've lifelong resident of Boston and worked in student organizing, which actually connected me with Karen some years ago to volunteer on Boston Greenfest. But throughout my journey currently to BioClean Boston, I've worked in different environmental startups and also worked in policy at EPA in DC doing government outreach.
Jatin?
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Jatin Chaurasia. I am the CEO for the Art of Living Digital. Art of Living is one of the largest volunteer-based organization, doing a lot of work on social impact through mental health, wellness, yoga, meditation. I take care of the IT infrastructure. Simultaneously, I am also managing IT consulting company and also have a fund. It's a venture fund focusing on next generation technologies and how to bridge the social impact together.
Thank you. And George.
Good afternoon, everyone. George Jamel. I am CEO of Council Fire. We are a global business management and sustainability consultancy, headquartered just outside of Washington, D.C., but operating across the world. And we bring together lawyers, economists, financiers, impact investors, and others, and ultimately to drive positive environmental, economic, and social impact. We're also leaders in the sustainable business movement writ large. For those that are familiar with B corporations, Council Fire certified in 2010. We helped pass the first benefit corporation legislation in the world here in Maryland in 2009. And we've won many awards from B Corp as a Best for the World B Corporation, trying to drive the sustainable business movement forward. And I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you all. You all have such exciting backgrounds. I mean, maybe first question is for that I have actually, Wadi, since you mentioned that you work with startups, and that's actually a very, very close subject to my heart, especially in this economy, which we're talking about. We're entering into a recession. Everyone is talking about doom and gloom. I wonder if you know, you can talk to us a little bit about your current enterprise.
Definitely, thank you. To give maybe even, I'll weave kind of a little bit of my background, also answering your question. When I did some of my student organizing at UMass Boston, it was actually, the focus was green solutions to community problems. So it was actually looking at how do we actually connect the intersection of the conversation we're having today, the social impact, the business and environment. So through those efforts in organizing, we were able to work with Karen and Boston Greenfest. I think through that lane of just being able to see, and what kind of moved me was seeing the opportunity to have a win-win, right? To be able to address the people, but as well as be able to address the environment and economic opportunities. So when doing this work with BioClean Boston today, which we focus on helping small business owners, commercial properties with their disinfecting needs, really focusing on how we can help them with their better indoor environment. It really kind of always started from how do we actually help some of the folks that I was working with already in the community around some of these issues, and getting them involved in an economic opportunity. So BioClean Boston saw obviously an opportunity with COVID, what's going on, but thinking more longer term, people focusing on healthier indoor environments, and taking some of the folks who typically would be on the sidelines, who typically I'm working with, out of work, laborers, contractors, folks who've worked in property management and construction management, and being able to apply their skills to a new market and new opportunity that I think can not only help sustain their families during this turbulent time, but I think also provide a solution to small business owners who are actually just trying to stay open for their customers, also employees.
Thank you. That's really very impressive, especially during these times. Very much needed, and a lot of people forget that there are so many startups that even start up right during the Great Depression, whether it was HP or even Disney started up in 1923, 24. Shimon, I see you're back.
Yes. Make sure everyone can answer their questions and so forth. So,
Yeah.
Shimon Warden, I'm on the board for the Foundation for the Green Future, the host of the Boston Green Fest. I'm really excited. I've loved how we've matured the Green Business Breakfast into what is now this summit, and taking advantage of everything that's going on. One of the things where we were having the conversation is often we've talked about in our movement about the challenges, the crises. And I think now we have an opportunity, because so much of humanity is listening, to speak about the future of work. What does this future look like? And since many of us here are practitioners in our various fields, I'm really excited to learn from you. And so our listeners and the people we'll rebroadcast this to can really apply this into their business, apply this into their thought process. Breen and I were speaking earlier today, and we were talking about the shift from corporate social responsibility to social strategy, where that means that early now, sustainability it's in the business model, it's in the pricing, it's in the strategy, it's how they're thinking, and that's transformative opportunity for us as that continues to grow. So very excited, and thank you so much. And everyone, please ask your questions on the chat on Hoovia. We'll do our best to fold you into the conversation about 30 minutes or so, and maybe 40. Thank you. So Wadi went, and let's hear from, actually, I think I was last. So one of the questions we had is what is sustainability? And I think, George, we had a question when we were talking about, since you formulated this new business model, a legal structure in the United States in a B Corp, what do you think that does to empower businesses? And can you explain to a business owner or investor how that changes the dynamic, especially between the social mission and the investor, or those various attributes?
Sure. Well, I think, in many respects, we need a new narrative about what business is here in the US and around the world. We have migrated from the original concept of a corporation being created to serve community, and heavily drawn in the direction of shareholder primacy and paying dividends and financial pursuit as being the one and only. And we need a new narrative. We see that model doesn't work. And that, at least here in the US, so much of our business infrastructure is geared simply towards financial profit. When you think about environmental and social impact and outcomes, it's not found on the typical American corporate balance sheet, right? We've done a tremendously successful job. If it's all about making money, we've done a tremendously successful job in externalizing those costs and pushing them off on society. And so we need a new narrative around what it means to be a business, who it is that we're seeking to serve, a shift from shareholder primacy to stakeholder primacy, as we often refer to it in the sustainable business world. And so, these are major transitions, but we tend to disregard history. We believe that, as things exist now is the right way or how it's always been. And so the idea of taking time to make those shifts, putting infrastructure in place, and Shimon, you mentioned legal structure. So I'll take 2 seconds to let the lawyer come out and talk about those legal structures as a mechanism for how that change can happen. Benefit corporations are ones that it's just a different corporate form, and corporate law is the domain of states here in the United States. So you don't register your company as a United States company. You're registered as a Massachusetts company, for instance. And so just like we have S corps or limited liability corps, now in 32 states and the District of Columbia, we have something called the benefit corporation. And the benefit corporation requires the business owners to change their operating bylaws to take social and environmental impact into account in the operation of their business on a par with the pursuit of financial outcomes. And the legal significance is it actually changes the fiduciary duties of the officers and directors. So, Shimon, you're the CEO, you've been paying a 20% dividend and you have a bad quarter. And rather than lay off people in order to still be able to pay that 20% dividend, you decide you're going to pay a 2% dividend and retain your folks. You're protected from a shareholder lawsuit in that context if you are a benefit corporation. And so changing the legal structure to incentivize and facilitate businesses that are operating as triple bottom line businesses seeking social and environmental impact and return, as opposed to simply financial, is critical as part of that transition.
Well, thank you, because I know when many of us here are consultants or work internationally, and it would be amazed how many people still are learning about benefit corporations and the different types of structures. Jatin, I'm really interested, and I think many people would be interested, since you are both in tech and you're in social impact, and that's a very exciting sector. Please give us your insights from either of those domains of where you see the future of work going, be that workspace balance, wellness, the use of technology, response to COVID. It's pretty flexible, but.
Sure. I'm going to start with one of my personal experience here. When COVID started, I saw, there are around 300 people who work with me in my consulting company. I saw, it has happened for the first time. In modern day history, it's happening for the first time, and I could see there is so much uncertainty, and for me, the first thing which happened was, since there is so much uncertainty, the mind goes on to something which is very certain. They want to hold on to something which can be very certain. And during this uncertainty, what can we do as a business to help them out? So the first thing which we started doing was help them towards mental wellness, what we can do, what are the programs which we can offer them towards their well-being, right? During the same time, and of course, I agree that the profitability eroded, the revenues eroded, and there is a recession which might be coming very soon. What you can do in these during uncertain times to help them out, and cutting, firing employees and letting them go in this crucial stage when they need us more is not an option. So as a social impact, personally to me, I focus on how we can make them strengthen, emotionally, mentally, through this wellness, mindfulness, meditation exercise, and then handhold them through these times. And of course, it is tough for everyone, for businesses, for them as well. But there is always a fine line which we can, as business, can walk in together with employees, if they're open and candid with the situation. Employees are also ready to walk with you the next step, and so does business. In tech space, I'm seeing so much of creativity is happening, so much of virtual, looking into from the venture point of view, I'm looking at so many companies where the events are going virtually. People are constructing all the stadiums like Madison Square Gardens in virtually. Shows are now happening virtually. I'm seeing a lot of changes happening virtually, and I see the future workspace would be the new businesses will come up, which will integrate a lot of tech, video, and people working from remotest part of the world. So in a way, it is quite good because it will help people connect more. But at the same time, I still feel that this industry is still forming more and more, and we have to see that how the virtual intersection will happen with how traditional ways of doing the business work.
Oh, fantastic. And in our pre-conversations, getting prepared for this panel, Ward, Jatin's comments bring to mind some of the solutions that you had that were bringing, can you speak on, and you can expand as you see fit, that solution you had when you were recycling and bringing an industrial, I think you called it biosequestration on that generation project. And I just found that very interesting. I think that what did you learn from that, and how could we apply that thought process?
Yeah, sure. So that particular enterprise, I got two main enterprises. I said earlier, Transkarbon is one of them, and that falls under that solution set. So in a broader arc, just to kind of build on George's comments, which were absolutely brilliant. History, we tend to ignore history, and the origins of business have been around community, whether they're the ancient guilds or whether they're community enterprises, co-ops that preceded B Corps, and I think they're another tool in the toolbox to reintegrate profits at the base level, to not exclude or principally be there to extract. So, but to answer your question, so Transkarbon is what we do is we take gases and we compress them into a solid state inside activated charcoal. There's a little sample of it here, and enabling to be able to do that enables us to do some very interesting things. And one of them is to capture CO2 coming out of engines. And so right now what we do is we use methane to co-generate power in greenhouses, and then we blow in we filter all the other elements out of the exhaust catalytically, and then we blow it all into greenhouses. And this increases the growth rate of the greenhouse plants, tomatoes principally, but cucumbers and everything else. And this enables us to do a couple of really interesting things. One, we produce more power than is required, so more power goes out to the grid locally. We produce quite an enormous amount of heat, which is used to keep the greenhouse warm, warm the water, and do other things. And then, of course, the net benefit is that the CO2 that would normally go into the atmosphere is biosequestered by the plants. So this is kind of a more of a holistic cycle. The next generation of technology that we have enables us to actually take that CO2, put it into the solid state carbonite, and then put it into an aqueous solution that then is pushed through the sprinkler system and sprinkle onto the leaves. And it actually absorbs into the leaves, just like a transdermal patch, if you've ever used those for medications. It actually, the gradient differential is a better driver of absorption of CO2 into the plant than the stomata, which is the breathing apparatus of the plant. So you can get it a lot quicker, you use less CO2, and the plants actually grow incredibly fast. We get about a 20 to 30% increase in biomass. And the interesting thing is the slight acidity of the water actually acts as an antifungal and a antibacterial agent. But overall, and I think this ties back to the the future of work and how we're doing things. What the kind of the broad enablement of this is to cohabitate production with near to market. So you can have these greenhouses be right next to where people live in a compressed area. You can grow more with less, and so you have a truck farming, or you can actually do it intercity. So now you're able to grow vegetables near to market, sell the excess or use the excess power and heat to the adjacent habitats. And so this brings together this really interesting opportunity. And what a lot of what I'm doing is ReLocalization, as I said. And in order to relocalize, you need to rescale. And so all of our solutions are very much community focused and local focused. So anything that we're doing is sub-megawatt on a power production cycle, or we're just in localized communities. Business improvement areas with Credyts, my other community currency business. And these things coalesce together to form the ability for local enterprises to be independent. And when you're independent, you're much more resilient. And I think that the future is going to be us being resilient and not, as George pointed out very correctly, we've been great at extracting profits and externalizing costs. And now we need to reimagine the enterprise of business in a brand new way, which is not brand new. It's the way things used to be. Be community focused again. And I think that will be our saving grace. We see ourselves now, or it's been the narrative, as George pointed out, that we need to begin with again, is the narrative of community. I think you're muted there.
Yeah. I think it got muted by error. I don't know how that happened. Anyway, so one of the things that, Wadi, can you talk to, and I see the bridge because I'm thinking CO2, and I thought about the Fairmont line. And for those who don't know, the Fairmont line was a resurrection of an old commuter rail that went right through the heart of Boston. And it had billions of dollars. It was great policy, but the community was unaware of it. And Wadi, can you speak to that and how you took that, how that, both from a policy from you as a student, and then how that developed your approach to business?
Definitely, yeah, and I definitely think that's a great intersection. As a student, someone actually was born and raised in Boston and went to school at UMass Boston. Majority of the students lived in Boston and in the community, and majority commuted via train or bus, etc. I live maybe less than 10 miles away, but it would take an hour and a half to get there just for all the different buses. So it spoke to just how just accessibility and importance of improvements in the Fairmont line. And I think there was a court order which kind of drove mandating of these stations. So as I kind of learned about this from just going to a community meeting that they were talking about a transit-oriented development, is how I learned about this major project. And as I'm thinking about it, and as a student, and folks around me who I knew were out of work, who were looking for opportunities, here you're talking about, I think it was at the time, the largest urban infrastructure project in the country. You had EPA, HUD, DLT, all these federal agencies, all these resources focused on there, and the community itself was
totally disconnected. So as actually a business management student, I saw the problem and saw potentially just how a solution and just really trying to just galvanize my fellow students around the problem. And so that's where, you know, it was called Fairmont Indigo Student Initiative. That was a student group we did, and the community workshops we put on were called Green Solution to Community Problems. So I think through that experience, and then through that experience, I ended up getting a job offer from EPA. I think realizing the opportunity to engage with these particular stakeholders, to be part of the conversation and part of the solution, I think that's driven a lot of like just looking at business opportunities. So the continuation of that was a company called Green Excel, where we focused on working around business development and selling green cleaning solution products. Like, this was like my first job out of college. So it always was finding a way, how do I get my folks involved in these type of opportunities, leveraging my skill sets, my business background, opportunities working at HubSpot, so working with startups, is how do I work with folks around me to help bring them a part of this opportunity. So now speeding now to where we are today with BioClean Boston, it's seeing again another opportunity for the folks that I'm working with. They have OSHA 10, OSHA 30 degrees, things. So how do I take their skill sets and bring them into an opportunity, which is for a learning curve, it's a pretty short learning curve. I mean, working directly with some of these community groups where we focused on really small businesses in urban communities right now in Boston. So the faith community and some of the other small nonprofits, those are a lot of the groups that need opportunity to get back up and running, but also there's an opportunity to get the folks who are in those communities, need those resources to be part of the jobs as well. So that's been a focus of the BioClean Boston, the team that we've built out and folks working around me. And it's been a lot of it's driven from, again, seeing some of the problems in our community and finding out, is there a better way to go about doing this? And so I think that Shimon speaks to kind of, I think, the bridge you're talking about.
Breen, can you speak to I'm hoping as a business school professor, hearing a person hearing something as a student, getting activated, solving that as a business problem. How do you approach that as both a practitioner and an educator?
Thank you, Shimon. So just to clarify, I taught social entrepreneurship at Tufts University. And there, I really like to really drive home the principle that you really can create a business where you are both making a profit and making that social impact. And I taught students how to write a business plan, how to pitch to investors, and how to really even generate those ideas that are really important within your local communities. And I was really proud of one student team, that created a plan to design these urban gardens on rooftops, which solved the problem of urban deserts that you see in our inner cities. And this was a wonderful example of a solution that, began in a classroom and could be replicated beyond the classroom, could be taken into any city. And that's something that I hope people take away from here, that the idea can come from anywhere and replicated. And your idea can basically be multi-purpose, right? Be mutually beneficial. There is a profit where there is profit.
George and Jetson, I know all of us work on international projects, but can you speak to where from your various perspectives, where you see not just a U.S. future of work, but a global future of work that is more sustainable on the various dimensions of sustainability?
Yeah, I can start with that, and I think I would tie it back to all the comments that were previously made. If you notice, there was a community base to all of the comments that were being made. the idea that we need to shorten supply chains, we need to become more independent as communities, which is counterproductive or counterintuitive to what we've all grown up with in terms of what's the methodology for the global economy, right? That we're going to be able to import things from all over the world. And so, and I'd be curious to hear from, you know, the folks on the panel and the folks listening in on their perspective on this. But so much of it is driven at the community level, the changes that we're seeking, but also the effectiveness. And, you know, you listen to Wadi's entrepreneurial efforts, they're to solve community problems. I mean, there are certainly opportunities to solve problems on a global scale, but the reality is the significant impact happens at the community level. And so when you think about the future of work, to me, the future of work is around addressing social, environmental, and economic challenges at the community level in a more sustainable, achievable, foundational way.
I would agree with all the panel here. You know, as I mentioned about the Art of Living Foundation, which I represent, and I take care of the IT infrastructure of the foundation. It's in 160 countries. 400 million people have been benefited by its programs. And as a nonprofit foundation, it has done wonders. You know, 41 rivers has been rejuvenated, 81 million trees has been planted. And I see it has all been driven through community, people coming together. And with the cause, they understand each other and they find solutions, right? And throughout this whole journey, when I've seen, you know, the transformation in people's life, I mean, of course, I keep on saying about wellness and how meditation and mindfulness help. Not only I've seen them, their inner strength, but it has also seen their outer dynamism, and it creates a community together. It has created a very big impact all across the world in many different social sectors. And I believe that, I believe that, as the theme of the panel says, these communities can have, you know, can find solutions, which is low cost, which is much more less cost than any other enterprise or any other government would do. They can come up with those challenging solutions. They can come up with solutions with those challenging problems with less cost, and those you know, solutions can also have economic benefit, and all businesses can also get benefited by it. So I see that community together can do a lot, and I'm seeing that all together. You know, recently in 2016, there were 3.75 million people came across the world to celebrate. You know, the foundation did was World Culture Festival. Although it was for technology, it was a nightmare for me. But there were 3.75 million people came. The stage was 7 football fields, and it was in New Delhi. And I saw a togetherness of community and what they can do together. So I've seen practically throughout, you know, last 18 years, which I'm associated with the nonprofit organization, that how communities have come together and transformed in a much bigger way.
So if I could just add to that, if I may.
Please do. Please do.
Yeah. So just to kind of pick up George and the other panelists' commentary, is that it's all about community, really, and enabling community to do what it does, and it does it usually most efficiently for, you know, the local. This is the other large enterprise that I have, which is Credyts, which is the account of value, and the community currency is what its product is. And the interesting thing is that it's an enabling technology that allows, much in the same way that you have crowdfunding for individuals to post a project that they would like to do, and they don't have the money to do it. And so the essential premise of this is to invert the issuance capability, the issuance of money, which is now a debt that's created in a bank loan, and instead invert that capability or to give the community, the individuals in the community, the power to create their own cash. And this is something that's been done, whether it's the Berkshire dollar or whether it's the Wara script from Austria in the 30s. This has been done many times around the world, quite successfully, and it's been done often in times of financial stress, and certainly another time we find ourselves in as well. So the essential is enabling technology to allow communities to create their own value and exchange value. And in that way, they don't really need to look for external. Federal government doesn't necessarily need to give them the money to do these things. They can do them at a much smaller scale, and they can do them with their own ability to create their own currency and exchange their own currency. So this is a subset of what we call complementary currencies. It's not to replace the dollar or the pound or whatever you happen to have as your fiat currency, but it is a model to allow exchange to happen, to encourage these things to happen at the local level. So it's hyper-local, it's community-driven, and it's driven and supported by, in a much way that crowdfunding is driven and supported by the people who look at the idea and say, yes, I want that to happen. They don't have to dig into their genes to pull out the dollars that they probably don't have anyway, but they can pledge their credits to that. And so this is my version of a solution that will assist communities to kind of come out of this and have the solutions really focused on bringing community together. And I think this is the one thing that Wadi was talking about, and it enables that. He was the EPA and all the other sort of federal agencies were in there doing their things, but there's the other local contingent that is often ignored or not enabled, and so I'm looking to enable these local efforts and to facilitate how they will how they be born and encouraged to grow.
Oh, fantastic. So I want us to take a little bit of a pause. Imagine the world 15, 20 years from now. All the consternation's off. What would the business environment look like? What would the community impact? I live in Boston. I take the train. I live right next to the train, but I chose to live next to the train because I don't want to spend 90 minutes every morning in traffic. It's horribly inefficient. It's stressful, and it's a byproduct of us all starting working bankers' hours, although most of us don't work in banking, technically. So what do you think as we change business, as we change work in that dynamic and the community's relationship, how do you think work itself in a sustainable way, how would it impact the environment, the human being's well-being? What is your vision of the workplace or making the product, and how is that healthier for the community? So for the listener, so they can imagine this world, how do you see that world?
Is that a question for me?
Oh, that was a question to the panel. So, if everyone could take 3 minutes on that, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, I'll start off just for no particular reason. So I think that as kind of said at the outset, I'm a decentralist, which I think is all about relocalization. So I think that the future of work is local and it's community oriented. We do have the tools. I think one of the great things that the internet and software beget is everything was built on, government research grants and then the free software, was how things promulgated and allowed us to build this great technology infrastructure that we have now. So in the same way, I think that ideas are easily and quickly transposed and transmitted. So I think that local work, you know, I live in Vancouver on leased land, which means that it's affordable. We lease off the city, and so the cost of me being able to live and work in an area that is affordable versus having to, you know, go to some suburban location and then train in or drive it. So I think that we need to really think about relocalizing our production. George mentions this, you know, constraining supply lines, and only, you know, producing things that one thing locally and importing everything else. I think we need to really think what we produce locally, and by doing that, work will become more engaging and more local, less travel, more focus in the local area.
Since you were mentioned, George, you want to mention your vision?
Sure, yeah, it parallels Ward's. I mean, and you think about the work from home dynamic that's underway. Clearly, that has a larger role to play than had been previously imagined. And so one can envision more folks working from home, less traffic, less pollution. And if we're able to transform the principal purpose behind businesses, far more satisfying work, work that seeks to solve social and environmental challenges. Again, building off of Ward's comments, companies that are more focused locally in servicing the community. You know, if you think about the dynamic that we've created, right? So for the percentage that are fortunate enough to have resources to invest, you're putting money into something that's completely invisible to you. It's being utilized in some manner that you know nothing about. All you're currently concerned about is what is the return. If you change that investment structure, if you get out of, you know, the SEC and the control for accredited investment and what have you, Ward was talking about crowdfunding. You know, you're investing in the local business operated down the street by the person that you know, and you're seeing what they're doing with your investment, and you're seeing how they're serving a community need with their business.
The way banking used to be.
It used to be, right, the corner butcher, all those sorts of things, but that's an entirely different dynamic as to the future of work, right? You are now, on a daily basis, you're getting the return, financial return, of course, in your salary, but also the return of knowing that you're helping your neighbor by providing a service or a product that they need. And you know how they're performing, right? Because you can see if that local shop owner is dumping, you know, pollution into the local stream out the back, they're not going to last long in that community.
Yeah,
right?
You're right.
And each of these are going to their roots are going to be far deeper, and their behavior is going to be entirely different. They're going to pay a living wage, right? Because they're going to be hiring their neighbors. So obviously, that's, you know, we're not expecting a wholesale change overnight, but it's that kind of infrastructure that fundamentally shifts all of the challenges that we have today. If you think about things that have been exposed by the, you know, what President candidate Biden said last night, 4 different, you know, disasters of pandemic, economy, social injustice, and climate change. If you think about all of those things, they can all be tied in many respects back to the infrastructure that we're currently operating under. Going local is a direct response to each and every one of those, and that each and every one plays a role in addressing those challenges. And so that has to be the future of work. If it's not the future of work, well, there's not a lot of work days left.
Yeah. All right. Wadi and Jetin, can you speak to this? And first, Wadi, because what happens in the future of work if we go local? What do you think is going to be the impact on communities who are resource constrained now? In the future, how do you think do you think they will be prepared for that future, or will there be innovation? You can, use your imagination how you want to answer.
That's a really good question. I think we could always look to the history in our past, and some of those blockers and friction there, I am assuming they're going to still be there in the future, right? So with that said, even the example and why that the Fairmont Indigo line is highlighted a lot by government agencies was actually how they pivoted and got the community involved. And I think there's still literally an advisory group or advisory board to this day working on issues around the Fairmont line. But it was the agencies and the government, and I guess like better was the institutions understanding that they needed the community to be a part of the long-term sustainable solution. So I'm hoping that where we're at today, I think is a lot different than where we're at. Particularly, I think that the digitalization of the workspace and where folks are, I think that's going to happen more and more. So I do see people working more remotely. And I do see there being more opportunities for the local economy and folks in the community. But I think it's still going to be about bridging that gap and ways in which we could work to, whether it's a technical gap, whether it's a financial capital access financial gap. But I think there is an opportunity, but I still think if the community is not involved in the solution, we might still be where we're at today.
Yes, what I see 15, 20 years from now, or throughout this journey for next 15, 20 years, I see highly virtual environment, people working remotely. There will be many innovations which will happen to break the social barriers. So for example, if I do namaste here, you will see me doing a handshake over there. So there'll be many innovations which will happen in that way so that we can remove those social barriers. It will be virtual, a lot virtual, remote, but at the same time, businesses will reward their employees and will invest heavily in the in mental health, investing in their mental health, emotional health, and at the same time rewarding them if they do something in the community, because since they're working remotely. And I see more the economics will help the local community. At the same time, I also believe that it will be most community driven, enforcement by the community for the local businesses and so forth. I also envision that more companies will be aligning towards the UN SDGs, the Sustainability Development Goals of UN. So many businesses will start aligning one or the other and would be championing those causes in next 15 to 20 years.
Well, that's great. As someone who's a co-founder in a remote work telecommunications and telehealth company, that sounds fantastic for me and my fellow co-founders. So I like that future. Abreen, can you, in the waning moments, can you wrap this up and put a nice overarching arc on or a capstone on this conversation? And for everyone listening, we're going to make sure to have access to people's information, their businesses and their projects and so forth. We'll push that out as well.
Sure. I think this time in history with COVID and the recession presents both opportunities and challenges. We're seeing opportunities with the future of work, with technology, but with sustainability. And I think we covered a lot in terms of technology, transportation, even human resources. So whether it's working from home, but I think there's a lot to be looking forward to in the next 20 years. I think maybe this pandemic has accelerated changes. The future is a lot sooner than we had expected it to be. But thank you everyone for joining this session. It was really a pleasure.